And just to say good morning and welcome to the webinar. I'm Fiona Thompson, PPMA board member. The session today is being presented by Chris Grimes, Sales Director from Matrix SCM. And in this session, Matrix will focus on trends in the temporary recruitment market in local government, and we'll be discussing some best practice that customers are using to overcome shortages. Chris will explore the previous year's recruitment trends within the public sector, looking at regional challenges after the COVID outbreak and the post-Brexit difficulties. And the session will be a mix of data-led insights with best practice from the sector shared. So that's a very brief intro, so I'll hand over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. I'm going to, morning everyone. I'm going to try and share my screen. It has worked already once, so fingers crossed there should be no last minute hiccups.
All good, Chris.
And hurrah! So hopefully that's all come up on your screens. There's just as a technical issue, Fiona, maybe you can help me. Do I need to minimize my Zoom, or can you see the whole slide?
See it all.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Fiona, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Good to see some familiar faces on the call and familiar names on the call, and some new ones. So hello, everyone. Obviously, as Fiona says, I'm looking to go through using a bit of a mix between data and some sort of customer insight around sort of previous year, some of the challenges we've seen off the back of COVID and Brexit, post-Brexit sort of difficulties with EU workers. And to support me in that endeavour, I've invited my colleague Matthew Tellum, who's on the call as well. Matthew is a business manager for Matrix, who covers Wales and the Southwest. So I think Matt's got some interesting stuff to talk about around what Cardiff Council have been doing in the past year. If there's any questions, feel free to sort of pop them in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. If I can't answer them because I'm not the fountain of all knowledge, despite what my ego says, then I'm happy to take them away and come back with some answers. So shall we begin? So over the last year, so this obviously gives us a bit more data than the previous year, but over the last year, what we've seen is the number of and the need for temporary labour has increased sort of quite dramatically. If you compare it back to 2020 is a bit of an odd year to compare it to, but if you compare it to sort of the previous 2 years, so 2018, 2019, sort of we're sort of nearing the over the 45,000 mark in terms of the number of placements that we've created and managed within the marketplace, and that's quite an interesting stat. I think, you know, it's been a very, very busy year. If we look at some of the roles that's included, it's been a lot of frontline roles, and I'm sure this is all familiar to a lot of people on the call today. It's sort of care assistant, support worker type roles, sort of nursery workers, sort of refuse and street scene. There's an awful lot of qualified and unqualified social care. Interestingly, obviously during the pandemic, sort of interim executive type roles kind of took a bit of a backseat. And again, I'm sure I'm telling you all things you already know. But obviously during the pandemic, sort of it was a big focus on frontline roles and sort of those interim day rated workers coming in with specific projects kind of took a bit of a back seat. But if we look over the last year, of that sort of 45,000, nearly 1,500 of those were interim day rate roles, which is quite high in comparison to previous years. So the first point really is just to say, you know, it's been a busy year, and if you're feeling it like it's been like you've needed a lot of agency workers, you're seeing what the trend is. You're not alone there. But interestingly, comparing that, what we are finding, what this slide shows is the number of orders created over time, but also the number of candidates that have been submitted. So actually, what we're finding is there's less candidates being submitted for the roles overall. There's less candidates out there in the marketplace versus the number of orders that have been created. So actually, the candidates, again, just to give you all a bit of comfort, if you're all feeling like there's not an awful lot of people out there in the market and it's really busy, again, you're not alone. So I think that's kind of the first sort of couple of takeaway points for us to say that there's, it's a really busy. There's a lot of, to use the analogy, there's a lot of people fishing at the pond, but there's fewer fish in the pond, and there's a number of reasons behind that. What we believe, one of them is that there is just more people looking for temporary workers, so by definition there'll be less people in the marketplace. Two, with certain roles, particularly frontline roles, we've seen a lot of press around double vaccinated workers, COVID restrictions. So then that slimmed down the pool, and also, during the pandemic, people found different ways to earn money and different ways to sort of satisfy their temporary working requirements, and things like Amazon deliveries and Uber and all of those sort of those industries have exploded as well. So then we're competing with those type of organizations for the same workers. And then that coupled with EU workers leaving during the pandemic and post Brexit has made the situation a bit more challenging, I guess, over the last year or so. So we need more. There's less of, but hopefully a bit of sunshine and a bit of brightness in from the data that we're seeing. For those on the call who are our customers or who work with us currently, one of the SLAs that we try to work towards is a sort of a minimum of 3 sort of suitably qualified candidates submitted per order or per role. What this slide sort of shows is the average number of candidates submitted. Now, obviously, you can see in 2020 Q3 of 2020 there was a big spike, but that was around sort of the time when there was a big bulk of people out there looking for work and a huge array of people. But we are still seeing sort of just short of sort of 6 people on average being submitted per role, which is a good number of choice. So although there are fewer people out in the marketplace and there's more people and more organizations looking to recruit, the good news is there's still people out there that should be able to submit and deliver against your requirement, and hopefully that's what you're finding out there yourselves. So that's some good news there. The next few slides are just to show you some data around, and annoyingly I've got my screen, I'm just going to hide my camera so I can see the whole slide. So the next few slides are just to really just talk through sort of pay rates and how those are looking on sort of in terms of where the market's moving to. So the admin clerical category, if you like, is the sort of first category, as you can see, has remained pretty static and pretty flat in terms of the pay rates, and that'll be interesting to see where that goes to over the next year or so, over 2022, across all of these categories, with inflation and things like that we're expecting. But if you compare 2021 to 2018, again with 2020 being a bit of an outlier, the rates are relatively flat in terms of the average pay rate, the black mark on the chart. So in 2018, Q1 2018, you're looking at sort of £14 an hour as an average pay rate for the workers. And actually in Q3, Q4, again, it was about the same level, between 14 or just above £14 an hour as an average pay rate to those workers. So again, it's remained pretty flat and pretty static there. Just trying to get to the next slide. How odd. There we go. Sorry, I tried to be technical and remove my camera so I could see it, and then it stopped me from changing the slides. So technology, but this hopefully is an interesting slide. So one of those frontline roles that we're seeing more of, it's around catering and hospitality, is around catering hospitality is one of the ones that's been really impacted by some of the things we spoke about previously, particularly around the EU worker sort of side of things. And let's try and focus on the average rather than the outliers. But the average is growing quite dramatically, really, in comparison. So in 2018, Q3 2018, you're looking at sort of about £8.50 an hour. We're now looking at sort of £10-11 an hour, with obviously some spikes around sort of the head chef type positions of £25. So there's some quite interesting sort of spikes there, that the pay rates have gone up, and I think, you know, we'll all recognise that when typically a lot of sort of EU workers sort of fill these type of roles, and they've left a bit of a gap, and therefore the pool has got a bit shorter and smaller across the piece. So those roles have become a bit more expensive to recruit. And equally, again, I included this slide because I thought it might be of interest to some colleagues on the call from the HR community, sort of those day-rated interims, HR sort of interims. And I'd be interested to know other people's views of why this has happened, because I can't point towards COVID or EU workers on this instance, but you know, back in 2018, 2019, the average pay rate for a HR sort of day-rated worker was around the £200 an hour mark. We're now seeing it sort of over sort of in Q3, sort of getting up to sort of nearly £400 an hour day rate, up to sort of £350. So again, it was one of the areas where the market took a bit of a hit during COVID, where those day-rated workers kind of reduced. But it's back with a bang, and I think those pay rates have increased. So perhaps where people were seeing less opportunity as interims during sort of 2020, kind of took more substantive roles, and therefore the pool is shortened. That could be one area and one reason why we're seeing what we're seeing. And then just interim exec as a general category, and that can include everyone from your HR through to sort of surveyors and IT and senior people within the council. That again, it's remained pretty flat and pretty static from sort of Q1 2018 to sort of 2021. You know, it's, if anything, it's dropped a little bit. The average was above, at some points, above £400 an hour. And we're now sort of slightly below £400 an hour. I do expect to see those pay rates slightly creep up over time, again, as that market starts to recover a little bit. But equally, what we're seeing with these type of roles, as well as more use of statement of work type positions, so less requirement, less sort of focus on sort of day rated and more on tasks and milestone type payments as well. So that market's taken a bit of an interesting turn in the last 18 months or so. So it's quite some quite interesting stats there. One of the biggest areas of spend and need, if you like, over the last, the biggest category of requirement over the last 12 months has been social care qualified, so social workers. And I do remember sitting on a PPMA webinar back during 2020, during COVID, and talking about where we saw potential spikes in market coming. And one of the things we did say was around social care qualified, because, you know, predictions of avalanches of social care cases, and unfortunately we've seen some cases, high profile cases in the news recently. So there has been a big increase in terms of number of people required in this sort of social care qualified space. But hopefully the good news here is that the pay rates have stayed quite consistently across the piece, and it's worth pointing out that these are PAYE, so you're probably looking at limited rates of around sort of £31-32 an hour as an average, but quite consistently they've remained sort of quite level, which I know that the rates are relatively high, but in line with a lot of people's regional MOUs, memorandums of understandings, where there's pay caps on social workers, and regions are trying to control spend in this area. We've been able to help our customers sort of stay quite consistent in terms of their spend on pay rates in this particular area. So again, I think a bit of some good news there, hopefully some good insight there around qualified social workers, that we are seeing a high demand, but the pay rates are staying quite consistent. So long may that continue, and we will always work with our customers to try and continue that. And again, a slight increase, but again, one of the bigger categories or bigger uses of workers that we've seen over the last 12-18 months is sort of non-qualified social workers, and it's again a particular area where those people who were available previously are no longer available. So it is very much a smaller pool, and I think that's been reflected in the pay increases. So the rates have gone up. Back in 2018, we're looking at just over £10 an hour. We're now creeping on average up to sort of £14-15 an hour. So the pay rates have definitely increased here in this space, and it's sort of part of the wider sort of theme of the session, I guess, where we're saying the needs increasing, but the pools decreasing. So as such, the pay rates are starting to go up, and we'll keep an eye on that with our customers and see where we go with that, really. Hopefully that was something interesting and good news for everyone. Is I'll stop wittering on now for 5 minutes or so, whilst my colleague Matthew sort of gives a bit of insight around hopefully some best practice that one of our customers is doing around sort of demand of workers and how they've managed to source those workers.
Yeah, so thank you, Chris. Hi all. So yeah, as Chris mentioned, I'm the business manager for Matrix for South West and South Wales. So I'm going to talk about Cardiff's track and trace. So as everyone knows, track and trace is huge with COVID. So initially, when it first came out, they were trying to do it internally, and the manager reached out to me and just said, look, we need to get workers. We're looking for 300 workers. How quick can you turn them around? So we worked with local SMEs, reaching out to a number of suppliers that we've worked with for a number of years, and we give them the backstory. And I think it's fair to say within the workers, we filled it within 3 to 4 weeks. I think each week they were meeting on daily, on average about 20 to 25 per day, to get them in to do some training. And they've now recently come out to us to ask for a further 100 workers because of the new COVID variant. So hopefully now we're working with the SMEs to get some more. What we tend to work with, though, we try and, with a situation like this, it was quite unique. So that wasn't something I've ever experienced before. So it was quite new. And I think with the trends that Chris has shown, after the first lockdown, there was a lot more candidates in the market because people were moving who previously worked in schools or anywhere that was affected under the furlough scheme. So they wanted to get back into work. So this was a great opportunity for them to do so, and choosing the SMEs, it was a good story for the council at the time. Now that we need a further 100, I think it's slightly different because, as the trend shown, that the candidate market is slower than it used to be. But we've been given a month's warning that they needed this. So the good news is we filled 75% of the roles, 75 roles within the first week. And the second week, we filled 100. And that's just by working with the suppliers that we have in the chain, constantly keeping in communications, having forums, and just to, being open and honest. And if there's people that they think they want to get in, meeting with them, they vet them all for us. And I've got to be honest, I think the continuity of the work has been really, really good. The consistency's been there, and Cardiff have been really happy. I know we have got a quote that we did on a previous slide that I didn't send over today, but it just praised the work and effort that we put into it. So I think for us, it was just working as hard as we could, as clever as we could, because to get 400 workers all in one go is never going to be easy. So it was quite exciting for us to be able to do that. Because we're talking about trends as well, I know it's slightly off topic, but I know Chris mentioned about the refuse workers, the drivers and EU being affected. Just to give you guys a bit of peace of mind of what we've done, we've worked with local suppliers as well, looking at army leavers, newly qualified, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of trends that we are looking at to try and gap the market, so to speak. But yeah, that's really it for me. But yeah, so Chris, back over to you, mate.
Thank you, Matthew. So hopefully that was some good example of some stuff. And again, I'm sure it's some information that's been sort of shared today is kind of in line with what you're all experiencing, sort of providing and helping to tackle some of the challenges that we've all faced as a country over the last sort of 12 to 18 months or so. So just in summary then, sort of just to cap on what we spoke about, as I say, in summary, demand, as you've sort of seen throughout this sort of stuff, has been as high as it's ever been, either through sort of your traditional roles around qualified social care, frontline sort of manual labour or general industrial type roles, or those specific COVID projects, if you like, those sort of track and trace type positions. So demands is as high as it's ever been. I think competition for workers is as high as it's ever been. So we need to find and continuously try and work with our customers, our partners, the recruitment businesses within our supply chains, and work in a smarter way to make sure that we're staying competitive and able to compete with your Amazons of this world and all those different new industries that are popping up and competing with us for the same people, and also trying to tap into those social enterprises that are out there as well to kind of find workers, whether it's trying to find solve those enterprises are trying to solve sort of youth unemployment. We've started to partner with some organisations that are doing some really interesting work there that's helped us to find some good candidates. And on the other end of the spectrum, there's a couple of really interesting social enterprises out there doing sort of stuff with elderly, sort of not elderly, the older workers in the marketplace. That's a really Freudian slip, so apologies there. And pay rates are increasing in some fields, but what we try to work with our customers is to try and ensure that the pay rates that are competitive, and if rates need to increase, they need to increase to remain competitive. But we're not just increasing pay rates as a sort of a knee-jerk reaction to try and find people, because ultimately then that's not the best way of finding people and working smarter, and it's a short-term reaction. So it's about kind of using the data to understand where we do need to increase pay rates, but doing it in a considered way. Any questions?
Okay, Chris, it's Fiona here. I just had a couple of questions, if I could. So in terms of the authorities themselves and, your experience of working with authorities, are they putting in place any initiatives that particularly attract agency workers to work for their organisations? Are you seeing any initiatives coming from the local authorities themselves?
I think we see. I think a lot of the local authorities that we work with do an awful of good work there to kind of find local people. We've sort of started to one of the things over the last 12 months or so we've done 18 months is around sort of talent pools to try and create sort of help enable that, to try and advertise for local people to form pools of candidates. And I think that's helped certainly, Fiona, to try with that. I think when the idea of talent pools first came out, it was kind of to almost seen as almost a cost-saving initiative to kind of source workers directly for those sort of higher paid roles. But actually, I think where it's been really useful is particularly around some of those frontline roles, to try and where maybe there's not a huge cost saving to be made, but it's just different ways to source people. So those frontline sort of track and trace. And I know Cardiff, Matthew, do a good amount of work there around frontline stuff with their Cardiff Works initiative. Yeah,
so I think with Cardiff, they've got two schemes. They've got Cardiff Works, like an internal recruitment. They've also got an into work. So we've started working with them over the past 2 years. COVID slightly affected it. But what it means is they've got their own pool of candidates. I think they quote 40,000, but realistically, actively looking, you're probably about 2,000 to 3,000. So what we try to do is work with those with some SMEs, where they put them into work, and it ticks the box for the council because then they're hitting their quota for getting people back into work, and they're also doing it via their own contingent labour contract. So it's really good. We also do supplier forums as well with councils. So I've done one yesterday myself. So as everyone on this call will know, social care has been quite a big struggle, and some authorities are very quick to increase the money. What we've seen is, rather than increase the money, is sell the benefit to the council. So the Ofsted rating, the caseloads, that kind of information is really good for the suppliers to be able to sell the authority for themselves. So we have forums quite regularly and often to be able to do that. And the feedback we get, I've just had an email from one of the suppliers today, just saying that we're probably the best forum they've been on for a long time. For the information they got, they can really see the benefits of selling it. So hopefully we're going to see a lot more candidates.
Yeah. And when you refer to SMEs, are you referring to recruitment suppliers?
That's correct. Sorry, yeah. So it's not your national companies. It's more your local suppliers. So not one man bands, but a smaller company that only works in a set region. So they're a local supplier. They don't have the capabilities to supply across the nation. So we try to involve them as heavily as we can with their local authority, because the councils want to give back to their local suppliers as well as national. But it's really good for them.
Yeah. Okay. Grand. Well, that's thank you very much indeed, Matthew and Chris, and very interesting webinar. And I think we're just coming to the end of our time today. I just wanted to mention to colleagues on the webinar that the next webinar is scheduled for the 28th of January at 12 noon, and that's being hosted by the company called Restless, and that's going to cover a better understanding of the over 50s and how to attract and retain more. So that's, as I say, is the 28th of January at 12 noon. So keep an eye out on the social media post for the registration. But without further ado, I think we're just coming up to the 12:30. So thank you very much. Thanks, Chris and Matthew.